Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker with your hashtag Better Together devotion for today. And this week I'm really delving deep into Romans chapter 12 as Paul writes and gives us a lot of deep thoughts and deep theology. One of the aspects of being a person, a human being, is that we are hardwired. Evolution did this to us to look for the negative. In fact, if you are scrolling through comments on any social feed that you've posted where you shared of yourself, you are scrolling fast, and the only ones that are going to be highlighted to you in your brain are the negative ones. We're hardwired for negativity. After all, if we had a negative experience in some form or fashion, it taught us how to survive. If you went into a cave and found that there was a bear in the cave, you knew not to go into that cave anymore. If you hit yourself with a hammer with a thumb, all that kind of thing, if it hurt, you were not, well, I don't want to do that again. The negative aspects of our lives, the mistakes that we make, are actually most of the time very instructional and help us survive. Sometimes, though, however, we take those same survival traits into our emotional life, into our spiritual life, and it becomes very detrimental. Looking only at the negative becomes harsh. I think that's why Paul writes that, "For by the grace given to me," chapter 12, verse 3, "I say to everyone among you not to think more highly of yourself than you ought to think." After all, there are those of us that need a healthy dose of humbleness. "But to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned." I like that phrase, sober judgment, to give ourselves a sober self assessment. In other words, we're not supposed to pump ourselves up with an ego simply because we think that or self esteem to get through it. I think in our culture, a lot of times what we have done is that we have said, as long as it pushes your positivity, it must be a good thing. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. We need to have humbleness, humility. And humility is knowing our limits, knowing who we are, and accepting who we are. And then having that sober self assessment, that sober judgment about who we are, so that we don't look upon ourselves too critically. Again, we are a people who love to go into extremes, left to right, whatever you want to call it. In this sense, you can be so humble that you're proud to be humble. Yeah, and that's not good. That's not really being humble anymore, right? Likewise, you can be so harsh on yourself, so non-gracious to yourself, that you don't offer yourself any compassion. And that leads to really dark places. Knowing our limits and knowing who we are and accepting who we are is one of the hardest parts of the human journey, especially as a part of our spiritual journey. So I can't preach as good as other people can. I accept that. So I'm not as good at praying as other people can pray. I hear some people pray and I think, wow, they're phenomenal. That's okay. I use that sober self assessment, that sober judgment to hold myself accountable to do the best that I can do, rather than comparing apples and oranges with other people. Likewise, I don't pump myself up too much by saying, well, I'm better than so and so, or I'm the best. I try to walk a life of humility. You see, we oftentimes fall into the trap of comparison, and we don't know the whole story of everybody. But we do know who we are. And so if we walk a humble walk, and if we simply allow ourselves to take time in prayer, to allow ourselves to fall within the embrace of God's grace, Lord, I humble myself before you and I offer myself to you as a living sacrifice, and I ask that you would help me discern where can I improve? Because you've made me, you created me the way I am. Where can I do better? Allow God's judgment upon you, a sober judgment, a sober self assessment, not one that's willy nilly or one that only seeks to pump up a false ego. Take time in prayer to do this today. Self assess, but do so soberly and with humility.